Everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub on this special Monday. This month, we're kicking off the IIoT theme. We've got a bunch of guests scheduled. We're super excited. We actually get to have two Manufacturing Hub episodes this week with honestly two guests that we've waited way too long in order to go ahead and get on. Before we officially introduce Francois, if you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're new here, we are an open conversation show over the course of the next hour or so. We're going to chat with Francois about all things IIoT, learn his super interesting background, talk about the rocket ship that the marketplace that Vention has become, and chat about kind of any and everything that you guys want. We are super open to having you guys ask questions. So my request to you guys is please go ahead and ask questions. Ask questions to Francois, ask questions to Vlad or myself. We really want to go ahead and get you guys involved, and we absolutely have the most fun while you guys are in the process of going ahead and doing that. But without further ado, everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy up here, Vlad. This month, we're kicking off the IIoT theme, and this is episode 106 with Francois Giguere. And Francois, I'm sure I have messed that up, but thank you for being here nonetheless.
No, that was quite good. You got it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Francois. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Before we dive into maybe the more technical topics, could you give us a bit of an introduction about yourself? What was your career progression like, and ultimately what you are doing today at Vention?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys. Thank you, Vlad and Dave, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure. So I like to call myself a normal electrical engineer. So I started my career very young, building all kinds of fun stuff at home with my dad, radio control airplanes, fixing dishwashers, and doing all that kind of stuff, and kind of got a passion for engineering early on. I studied in McGill University in Montreal in electronics and electrical engineering. I did a master's degree afterwards at Queen's University in power electronics as well in real-time control. And when I graduated after my bachelor, did about 6.5 years at General Electric in the lighting division, where I did a whole bunch of different things, but mostly around power conversion and control systems. And during my time there, I did some leadership development programs with GE back in the days, and completed my master's, like I said previously. In end of 2016, Etienne, the CEO of Vention, and Max, CTO at the time, reached out to me because we were acquaintances. They all also had some experience at the GE business I worked at. They called me up and needed somebody in electronics and controls to join them at Vention. So I joined on January 2017. So I was employee number 4, and you know, uh, during my time at Vention, built a whole bunch of different technology. I started with all the automation products, our machine motion controller, our control modules, and progressively developed the technology team. And as of July 1st last year, I'm the CTO of Vention. So that's my background in a nutshell.
Francois, I have I guess, a lot of questions, but I do want to maybe ask you a question when it comes to disciplines, right? So now you're certainly in charge of not only software, hardware, mechanical as well. You started off as an electrical engineer, and maybe you wanted to get your thoughts on, how do you develop knowledge across all of those, I want to say, careers that could be like a lifetime learning experience, right? And how do you maybe get to the level where you understand enough, maybe, and able to lead people as well within those roles?
Yeah, so I think one of the important thing is to become very good at one of them, kind of to understand the process of becoming an expert. And so that's how I started my career. And I think it's people tend to be scared that they won't necessarily, if they're not the most deep expert, they won't be useful. But I think you have to kind of dare to go in a different discipline and learn. And you tend to realize that there's a lot of patterns that are the same, and you solve problems the same way. And at Vention, one of the good things is that we have breadth, but we don't make the most sophisticated motion control. We don't make the most sophisticated 3D software, but we have a very large breadth. So it makes, at a distance, it seems a little bit crazy how wide our stack is, but we make it, we go less deep and we go wider. So that's it. But I would say you kind of have to, you have to embrace that learning is not necessarily reserved to become a super deep expert, right? Just dive in, learn what you have to learn, and after you're going to be able to understand the vocabulary and exchange with people. And the last thing I'd say is, don't be scared to surround yourself by people that are stronger than you, right? I have people in my team now that are better at electronics than I was even when I was at my prime. By surrounding yourself by these experts, you become super relevant in, doing the air traffic control and making sure everything jives together. So that would be my answer.
Gotcha. Let me ask you another follow-up on the career that you've mentioned, which was the leadership development program. So
Yeah.
I've personally not gone through one, but I've heard a lot of people benefiting a lot. Could you paint us a picture for someone who's maybe early in their career and is looking at one of those opportunities? What is it like, and ultimately, what are some of the takeaways from that?
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because it relates to your first question. When I did the leadership development program at G, it was 4 assignments of 6 months. So the first one was in Montreal in my home division, and after I went to Tel Aviv, I for a to work for a subsidiary of the company I was for, and I went to China and also to Cleveland, Ohio. And what happens is they purposefully, throw you in a new environment with new people, and you have to relearn, right? You have to kind of dive in. It's a different product line, it's a different technology, it's a different group of people, and I think it you learn to really be quite quick on your feet and to really focus on getting things done and focus on the outcomes. Right? You only have 6 months. You got to get through it. So for me, it was a blast. It was super fun, and you also get not only technically, it was called the Edison Leadership Development Program. They were changing us from product line to product line, but also for each product line, you would be closer to supply chain in a case or reliability in another case. So you would also have a good peripheral view of the business after the rotational program. So it was fun. Definitely not
Really
as fun as
interesting.
a startup, but it was a blast.
I'll admit that I've heard of people rotating, let's say, between like different states and cities, but I've not heard of someone going through that of
Yeah.
an extreme to go to a completely different country. So that's very interesting. Let me ask you, I guess, so today at Vention, obviously we know your title of CTO. Maybe could you paint a picture for someone who's not as familiar maybe with Vention, not familiar as the role of the CTO? What do you do maybe on a day to day and maybe like long term basis?
Yeah, so the CTO role at Vention is very broad. There's a portion of the role that is obviously on, technology strategy, and, what do we want our technology to look like today, and what we want our technology to look like in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. So there's definitely this aspect. I'm personally very active in making sure that we develop also the right products. So I partner very closely with the product team and also very closely with my people to make sure that we strike the right balance between what the market wants and what's technologically feasible with our capacities internally and where the technology is at. So I would say my role is technology vision, making sure we develop the right things, and finally just execution. Making sure that we execute on our schedule, that we keep people efficient, we follow good development practices. And I said finally, but finally, really the other thing is, taking care of the team, making sure we hire the right talent and we grow our people. So, a mix of, technology strategy, product and technology compromises, making sure we strike the right balance, taking care of our people and executing, right? Hitting our timelines.
I really like that. Let me throw one last question at you before I pass it over to Dave. So, building up maybe on that answer and looking back a couple of years ago, at least for me, my initial impression when I was initially introduced to Vention was that it was a pure hardware play, right?
Mhm,
Obviously, there's a need to build gantries, there's a need to build sort of like cells. And I think that made sense at the time, but I think it has changed a lot, at
mhm.
least since I had first looked at it, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
So, what was that? Maybe like what was the thought process? What did you see like in the market? How were you guys going through the transformation of becoming more of a platform? I think Dave used marketplace. I think
Yeah.
you could say software IoT, right? There's a lot of different terms, but what was the transformation like, or the thought behind the transformation?
Well, I mean, we always wanted to be a platform, and we always wanted to have a strong software component, but we needed to build the basis and the foundation of the platform, and then progressively grow from there, right? So you can't make a multi-axis palletizing gantry if you don't have fasteners, right? So we started by doing more of the hardware, more of the structural components, and after we brought in our motion control system, and after we brought in robots and then applications. So it was all a buildup of progressively what was possible to do with the technology that we had the time to develop. But the thing that we absolutely want to do is just make automation easier, right? And if you look at an automation project, it is a flurry of different disciplines, right? You have 3D design of parts, you have motion control, you have PLC programming, you have simulation, you have even supply chain and procurement. So all these things really can only be placed together and glued with a layer of software, right? So this is why the business has emerged more in the last year into a software play, because this is what binds everything together. Yeah.
Dave, thoughts?
So I think that's very interesting, and I think as we continue to go talk about some of these other questions, we'll absolutely get deeper into kind of the hardware versus the software, and the marketplace and platform that you guys at Vention are creating, because I think it's an interesting story.
Mhm.
Before we go and dig more into IIoT, you said a really interesting thing, or a couple of really interesting things in your background that I want to make sure that we hit on, Francois,
Yeah.
talking about knowledge and basically choosing. You can have deep knowledge on kind of one particular area, or kind of a wide, more shallow set of knowledge. And
Mhm.
I think to your point is, you could be a deep expert on one thing, you could be kind of a slightly more shallow expert on one thing, but you also used it in comparison to the Vention solutions that you guys have, of you've decided to have one or two solutions for, well, everything that I've ever looked up on the Vention website.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that, and how you choose, or maybe you personally chose to become an expert, and how you as a group chose to go build a wide range of
Mhm.
solutions, as opposed to just kind of a very narrow
Yeah.
series of solutions?
Yeah, so to make a car, you need wheels, you need a motor, you need
Mhm.
you need a minimum of every of a bunch of stuff, right? And it was the same thing for Vention. Our thinking was, if we want to reinvent the process of building industrial machinery and industrial automation, we're gonna have to have a minimum of the important components, right? So we started with the 3D machine builder software because we wanted to have an easy way to put the components together. The components needed to be all compatible with each other. So we said, all right, well, we'll make our own library, because if we just take what's on the market, we're always going to be stuck with this problem of compatibility of parts. And then we said, oh, if we want to ship fast, because we don't want this to take forever, then we're going to build our own supply chain system. And then progressively, if we want to automate without having to require PLC programmers, then we're going to need to make something easier. A simple Raspberry Pi won't do the trick, but people would want to program in Python. So we started to build SDKs in our own motion. So all of this built progressively with what seemed logical to continue to democratize this entire workflow of building machinery. And again, it's not that we do everything, but what we do, we're extremely fast, extremely cost competitive, and a lot of people, it's approachable, right? A lot of people can do it. So that was our thinking process. And as the company grows, we are getting deeper and deeper and deeper in certain areas that are strategic, like robot motion control, like processing, vision, electronics. As the company grows, we have more resources, so then we can also get deeper in these different buckets.
Absolutely. No, thank you. So I think that's interesting. And then I guess back towards the promise topic. And so for all of the listeners who haven't heard Vlad and I talk about IIoT on and off, over the last nearly 3.5 years at this point, Vlad and I always have this mostly fun debate. And I'll say mostly fun. Sometimes it gets a little bit less fun, of what is IIoT. Is it mostly hardware? Is it mostly software? It's probably, the answer probably lies in a combination between those. those.
Mhm.
But we promised you we'd ask you the hard questions, Francois. From your perspective, what is IIoT? Is it mostly hardware? Is it mostly software? Is it some combination? When you look at that or when you talk about it with customers, how do you describe it?
Well, at least in the context of a Vention system, it's definitely a mix of both. And it's a mix of both because I wouldn't want our customers to have to deal with the intricacies of consolidating these two worlds. So, our mentality is always democratization, ease of use, simplicity. Just the act for us to add an LTE gateway to a system, to connect it to the internet, to choose the SIM card and get all of this right is too much, right? Like, we don't want our customers to spend their time figuring out this integration, even if simple. We'd rather kind of get it out of the way. So for me, it's a combination of both, definitely. And the outcome is get the data from the data you want where you want without having to worry about it too much. So, and I'm sure some people listen to me and say, well, it's much more difficult than that if you have specific requirements and specific needs. But in my world, this is the definition that I kind of cling on to.
I think it definitely makes sense, right? Again, I've not heard like any formal definitions of IoT, and I think it certainly changes over time as well, right? I think we see a lot more companies adopting more software solutions versus pure hardware. So that's why, even though I think in the title there is Internet of Things, so to me
Mhm.
that means kind of hardware, but it is morphing a lot over. I want to say even the last couple of years, where everyone's wanting to collect data, everyone's wanting to make decisions out of their systems. And I think you guys showcased at this Automate a solution where you collect and present data
Mhm.
from
Yep,
your system, right? So it's no longer just the, let's
correct.
say, the machine or the palletizer or whatever. You also collect data, you present information. So it's a lot more
Yeah.
than just hardware, I would say.
So we have, in our world, we have four pillars: design, automate, order and deploy, and operate. So that's kind of like the big sections of the Vention platform. So the last pillar is operate, and we have three main products. One is machine analytics, where basically you don't have to do anything, and you have data from your machine that can go all the way up to the cloud, and you can create some dashboards and generate some insights and use that data to monitor your fleets. We also have a remote view product in which you can connect the camera. Everything is pre-configured, and you get a stream of your machine. And finally, we have remote support. We have two cameras on our teach pen, and you can contact with our team. So this is kind of like the last part of our ecosystem, which is, once your machine is up and running and producing, you can have access to it remotely, to the data.
Let me ask you, I guess, a question which I think ties back to some of what you mentioned on the product side. But I guess me as a, let's call it, control systems engineer in my
Yep.
past, I would get, frustrated with some of the PLC platforms. Again, I'm not going to
Yeah.
mention the names of them, and I would almost think like, well, I want to go down the path of building my own PLC platform, and then
Mhm.
you can see how big of a portfolio that truly is, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
just the controller, it's the I/O, it's the drives, it's
Right.
the safeties, right? And so maybe how do you guys select and draw the line of what's, how to say, like, makes sense for you to tackle on, and
Yeah.
then maybe some of the other items are like, hey, like maybe we'll wait for now and just kind of accept the reality.
Yeah. For us, the guiding principle is ease of use. So for example, our next generation of machine motion controller called Machine Motion AI is going to be a lot more powerful, but it's 100% driven by ease of use. And the ease of use now we're starting to have two tiers, like the non-automation practitioner and the automation practitioner. And the choices we make is, what kind of technology do I need to utilize so I get the power I need to give the ease of use to the customer. So, for example, I can use a field bus system for my drive that is going to be easily auto addressable, so I don't have my customers don't need to take care of addresses and IDs of drives. I can have technology that auto tunes my motors. So this is kind of what we're after. How do we make the act of creating machines as seamless as possible? And a lot of the technology choices we make is for that. So this is one of our guiding principle. And even if we get to the power user side of things, there's still, even if you're an expert, there's things that are frustrating, like tuning drives. It's 2024, guys. Like, it's enough. You just gonna need to get over this. So that's it. So I would say ease of use is one of our big deciding factor.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think there's, maybe we have a too short of a window to discuss like how truly difficult some of these challenges are, right? And I think we can only appreciate like what it takes. And again, to paint a picture, you do have a team of engineers, again, electrical, hardware, and software that are working on these solutions. So I think we don't want to also like discredit the fact that it takes a lot of
Oh
engineering
yeah,
effort to be able to like simplify those things, right?
absolutely. Yeah, making things simple is definitely challenging.
Let me ask you, I guess, like, do you see a world where it becomes almost so simple that we don't need necessarily like engineering resources to extent that we have today? Or maybe like what does that transform as far as like the dynamic goes when, let's say, the end user receives the product and then they're able to assemble it, they're able to like configure it? What is that? Do you have like a vision in mind of that?
Yes. So I visit factories quite often, and I see people the age of my mom, like 60, 70 years old, that are doing these triple D jobs, like dangerous, dull, and dirty. And for me, that's the driving factor, right? Like, if let's get rid of these as much as possible and give these people more fulfilling jobs. And the truth is, we are like, society is the bottleneck to this, because we don't create enough PLC programmers, we don't create enough mechanical designers, and it's too complex to make these machines, right? It's difficult. So the vision is definitely to make this as automated as possible. There are limits, right? I'm not sure we're going to be able to make this a one click, it's solved problem, but definitely with the promises of AI and our platform, we see a playbook for generative design in the 3D assembler. We see also playbooks for more sophisticated vision that will take care of complex tasks automatically without necessarily requiring very imperative programming. So there's a lot of opportunities. Um, I think it's important not to get too excited with these things. It's exciting, but it's important to get the basics right, tuning the motors. But eventually, I think we want to definitely strive towards that goal of making this as seamless as possible so we can deploy more of them and faster.
Let me, I guess, once again, throw like one question at you before I pass it over to Dave. So, as a follow up, and you almost like stole my thunder on that question, Francois, because I think there's also, when you talk to customers, especially in the current marketplace, at least in my mind, there could be noise, let's say, coming from the AI side, right? Everyone's
Mhm.
excited, everyone's trying to
Yeah.
change the way we program things, change the way we do maintenance. So how do you guys also, sift through, I want to say, like customer asks and figure out, well, again, like what is worth sort of putting a lot of effort into, and
Yeah.
maybe what is a little bit too early or too, because like everyone's doing I think like a brand deal with a lot of the graphics cards, let's say like manufacturers. Again, I'm not going to mention the specific names. I think we all know
Yeah. Yeah.
who we're talking about. But
Yeah.
how do you make those decisions in order to not maybe like fall into being at the bleeding edge, and then you're sort of
Yeah.
uh, like left with a solution that's less than adequate?
Yeah. So we are at Vention. We've always been extremely pragmatic commercially, and the reason is we talk to customers. We have a web platform, and we get tons of requests all the time. So it's becoming quite straightforward to see patterns, right? We have customers asking for depalletizing, for depalletizing, for depalletizing. You say, oh, okay, like there's a playbook there. There's probably a pull in the market. So that's how we sift through these requests. Well, we see the patterns that we get from our commercial counterparts in the sales team, and also we see what's productizable, right? You get to a point where we've been doing this for 7.5 years now. We developed a pattern for this we can easily inject in the platform and reuse, and other things can't. So we see quickly, I'm going to productize this next feature of the motion controller, but I'm not going to do bin picking for arbitrary objects, because we know very well that a fireman hat and a rubber boot, it's just nightmare to manage these two things uh, with the same amount of arm tool and with the same process. Um, so yeah, so I would say we're really commercially focused. So we understand the patterns. We make sure we productize the technology that we build, and we're pragmatic, right? Like, if we're not going to solve a customer problem, we don't need to bring AI to the table, right? If it solves customer problems, then we'll use it.
Dave?
Thank you, Vlad and Francois. I think that's interesting. I was laughing because you might not listen, you might not have heard, but Vlad and I have gone back and forth with AI and kind of the value of
Yeah.
AI. I think it will be interesting to see what it turns into, and I think we see lots of companies investing engineering hours and money into trying to stay at least relevant in those
Yeah.
conversations. As to if it turns into mainstream product in 6 months to 24 months, or if it turns into, hey, this was an interesting trend that we devoted a couple of
Mhm.
engineering years of time to. I think it'll be interesting, and at the end of the day, only time will tell. I would say that I think IIoT, because we're pulling in so much data from a variety of different sources, be it known good sources or known or unknown good sources,
Mhm.
has the opportunity to hopefully reduce a bunch of human years worth of time as we go through the process to go collect and normalize and all of those other things of that data. But time will absolutely tell. You were talking some examples of kind of the roadmap of, hey, you guys get so many questions of depalletizing, enough probably depalletizing and enough palletizing that I'm
Yeah.
sure at some point you're like, yes, we should go have some palletizing and depalletizing solutions. How do you navigate those requirements, right? So, from my perspective, you've got end users who are probably looking to purchase. You
Yeah.
probably have systems integrators who are looking to get into an integrator program or to go leverage you guys putting this together. You've probably got OEMs who are like, Francois, I want to buy 400 palletizers and
Mhm.
depalletizers every year. How do you navigate the requirements that you get from a variety of different groups to go put these solutions together?
Mhm. Well, the a little bit like I was saying before, this compromise between product and tech is the desirable and the possible, right? So the tech we have and our level of maturity is the possible, and the demand on the market is the desirable. What we do is, like I said before, we work very closely with with our sales team to see what the patterns are, and we're trying to gauge that pattern with what our tech can do and what that pattern signal is. So, for example, our first palletizer was really simple. It had only a few features, but did the job well because we talked to a customer that wanted something simple, and we said, okay, let's just do that, and we'll build upon it. And then progressively, we make it easier to utilize, and we add more features: async, in-feed, multi-pick, slip sheets, customizable path. And we get to a point where it's becoming super easy to deploy these solutions for most people. And then we transition into the integrator playbook and the VAP playbook, where these people take the solution and then run with it. So that's kind of our playbook. Again, we start with something simple, we go commercial, we test the thing out, and then we build on the feature set. And our mentality is always we leverage the Vention ecosystem. If we cannot build it with Vention, then we leave it for later, or we consider it a pilot project and then we utilize it to better the platform.
Absolutely. No, I think that that's really interesting, and I like the idea of, can you build it with what currently
Yeah.
exists on platform. I won't ask you the number. I feel like this would have been really good if I had known that you guys have, I don't know, like 12,000 different individual parts within platform. But I imagine at this point there are lots of parts within the platform
Yeah.
for you to be able to go ahead and build a variety of these different solutions.
And it becomes tough. Like we have to, at some point, there's always a request for something you don't have and something that's a little bit different, and you have to kind of stick to your strategy and keep the Lego blocks. Yeah.
How do you decide what's within core competency versus, and it's probably different today than it was 7 years ago.
Yeah,
7 years
for sure.
ago, if someone said, "Can you build this for us?" I would imagine it was a fairly easy yes.
Yeah.
Today, you probably have to be more cognizant and aware of what
Mhm.
Vention is good at and what the platform is good at. How do you now kind of determine what makes sense to go build and expand the platform versus keeping it more core competency of what has got Vention to
Mhm.
this point?
So there's two things, right? We always obviously want to grow. So when we see opportunities that, a strong signal pattern from the market, it's things that we'll necessarily focus on, just like range extenders a couple of years ago and palletizers. So when we see these big, strong signals, that's always an indication to be careful and to focus on this area. The other thing is also we have a vision for the platform, right? We know, we're building the authoring platform, we're building our simulation capabilities. We want to make the platform the best tool for low to medium complexity automation. And we always look a year, 2 years in front of us, and we know things that are coming up. So, for example, there's going to be more vision, and there is going to be more AI on the Vention platform coming. And when we see these projects and these customers that are requesting things that align very well with our vision, we're always very interested to learn more and to lean in with them and to undertake these projects. So it's an overlap of strong market signals and where we want to take the platform. I would say guide us pretty well.
I think what's really interesting, Francois, and again I don't want to make the assumptions that you guys are obviously like pulling that data, but you can obviously see if, let's say, Vlad goes onto the Vention website
Yeah.
and configures some kind of a cell and maybe doesn't end up buying it or ends up buying it and then changing it to some extent. You can then see the signals from the
Yeah.
actual purchases and the installations, right? Versus, let's say, in the past, let's say if I create that in AutoCAD, I send it to a
Yeah.
machine shop,
Exactly.
then there's absolutely zero visibility to anyone besides, let's say, that machine shop that build that one machine. So I think it becomes extremely
Very
interesting.
powerful.
And again, I wouldn't want to put you on the spot on this, but I think you can even pull the signals from, let's say, the control systems, and you can even see what kind of problems people run into or don't run into, and you can adjust. Almost, I guess the best parallel I have would be Tesla, right? Where ultimately they can push updates, they can see the data, they can collect kind of information. So again, I think it's very interesting to see this in the manufacturing space. If you have like thoughts on that, more than
Yeah.
welcome. Again,
This morning I was talking to Max Windisch, the former CTO of Vention, now CSO, and he was telling me he was analyzing some of our website data and found that the interval of visits correlate very strongly to the level of self-serve of someone. So he was saying if you're under 6 days of interval of visits on average, we can have a very strong signal that you're going to be a user that will self-design, for example. So there's a lot of information because because we have that full pipeline of creating machines, we can track what people are doing. We have this information, so we can make sure we tailor their product to serve them well, and also we know their intent. So yeah, there
just
is
to
such
expand on
difference.
that like point a little bit, Francois. So self-design. So I guess what you're saying is there's two paths, right? You can build it yourself. So I could go on the website and obviously create, whatever skid or
Mhm.
palletizer machine I want. But you can also, you guys offer a consultation service. Like maybe how does that work? How
Yeah.
do the two paths work?
So we found that one of the strongest way to help people become independent on the platform is to start by helping them. So like kind of like coach or teach by example. So very often when new users come on the platform, we will have application engineers. We have a team of application engineers that are phenomenal with the tool. So what they'll do is they will go and help customers on a project and show them how the tool works, build a solution with them, and then afterwards the customers become independent by themselves, or sometimes they use our application design services if they're not cognizant enough. But the playbook is really, we help customers out, they become independent, and then they create their system. Some people don't want to talk to human beings. They just want to go in, not read the user manual, and get it done. That workflow happens too. And the third one is simply applications, right? Customers go on the website, they buy an outcome directly, and they run with it.
Interesting. If I may follow up with that, Francois, what sorts of groups are buying through Vention? Is it OEMs who don't have a bunch of kind of
Mhm.
controls engineering experience, or who don't have the experience to be able to go kind of put together the bill of materials and do that? Is it controls engineers who are like, hey, I can go buy all of this in one place and I don't have to source it from 30 different groups?
Mhm.
Who is very much kind of the core group that continues to come back and buy all of these offerings from Vention?
So I'll answer you with a riddle. So what's the difference
Ooh.
between an end of line packaging cell and a climbing wall. It's
I don't
completely
know.
different, right? There's
Yeah.
no relation. So that's how
Okay.
diverse the people that use the Vention platform are. Some people literally go on the platform to make climbing walls, and some people, build and purchase complete end of line packaging lines. So it's all over the place. So we have, if I was to structure my answer, you have, the R&D centers, very
Mhm.
kind of one-off. We are
Yep.
not controls expert, but we want to calculate the density of glycerol, and we have to shake this thing and then pick some stuff in. So we make it very easy for them. So it's very, for them, it's democratization and approachability, accessibility of the technology. And then you have a small mom and pop shop, I don't know, like less than $20 million revenue,
Mhm.
making some membrane that goes on their hardware floor. They need to palletize it, or they need to make some assembly stations. Another kind of more also democratized approach, low cost automation. They're not experts. And then you have the big conglomerates of this world that want to go fast, have astronomically long processes. All their controls engineer are super busy or they don't exist, and they want to have solutions fast because they have automation needs, labor shortage, and all that good stuff. So I would say that's actually I should have put maybe the SMEs first, kind of not super expert, have the need. R&D centers are more expert, lower volume, have the need, and then you have the big companies and a mix of all of this.
If I can ask, I guess, is it was it intentional to have like a very broad market? Obviously, I think you can service all of them today, but was the thought always to be like in this kind of like spectrum or this like larger arena versus did you focus, let's say, on manufacturers and now it's a byproduct that everyone kind of comes and is able to
Yeah.
maybe like create their own solutions?
Yeah, I would say, discrete manufacturing is probably the thing that we do the most. End of line packaging, discrete manufacturing, but the desire of Vention to democratize automation, our initial angle was to cast a very wide net because there's automation required in a bunch of different industries, and also the fact that the current technology for automation is highly expensive. It's, for certain other industries helps us, right? Like we can penetrate places where it hasn't gone before. So we didn't know at first that it would be such a wide net, but definitely the objective was to be relatively general purpose. Yeah.
Gotcha. And speaking, I guess the natural follow up is also the industries, right? Because I think that things are certainly done. I don't want to say completely different. If you go from I don't know aerospace to food
Yeah.
and bev to maybe
Yeah.
like CPG, but do you guys have like a focus, or I mean, obviously you can palletize, I think, for every industry, but maybe the
That's right.
specialized machinery could be a bit more unique to the
Yeah,
industry.
there's definitely things that we have a harder time doing. So, anything primary packaging, food industry wash down is, because of, our decision to do T-slot aluminum extrusion in the first place, it's not really compatible with that market. Anything extremely high precision is also going to be very difficult, right? Just by the nature of us using relatively general purpose. Um, Technology. So, but the industry, we cast a very wide net. So again, there's definitely end of line packaging, discrete manufacturing is our strength, but we do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Also, I want to ask you maybe shift gears just a little bit and ask you a question on the leadership side, right? Like,
Hmm.
again, I think in the beginning of the conversation, we talked about needing people across, again, software, hardware, mechanical.
Yeah.
What has been maybe some of the challenges, but also some of the maybe like you have some rewarding or interesting stories when the team sort of like comes together and brings something that maybe you didn't expect or that is out of the norm? I'm curious on the leadership side.
Something out of the norm. I'm not sure I really get your question.
Well, I mean, because again, I think the disciplines are very complex,
Hmm.
and a lot of times I would imagine that some of the projects are not necessarily going to be successful or as good as you would like them to be.
Hmm.
And were there like moments maybe where you were surprised that things have worked better than anticipated? Let me put it that way.
Well, so there might be something. So if I get your question right, there's the thing I've been impressed by from my teams is as I took on more responsibilities and as I grew myself, I left, voids and pockets of leadership and of responsibilities. And I was always impressed by how much people want to have impact and automatically kind of swallow these pockets of leadership and responsibilities and fulfill them. Um,
Okay.
and at the beginning, it was always a little bit strange because I thought these were my responsibilities, but they actually are, to be given away. So I was always amazed by how much people want to have impact and just kind of fill the gaps and make things their own.
Did you have
Um,
to coach them in those instances, or was it more
yeah,
natural? I guess just
uh, uh,
curious.
yeah, absolutely. But you coach and you explain and you teach people, and when is it done, right? When are people ready? And at some point, it just happens, right? It clicks, and I think that's a little bit to answer your question. What I thought was impressive y- uh, and nice. Yeah.
Let me ask you. So going back maybe to the tech side, looking into the future, as I know the CTO role is very forward looking, right? So
Hmm.
obviously you have your day to day tasks, and again, maybe discussing what you see in 2 to 5 years without necessarily going
Hmm.
into any proprietary information, but looking at again machine learning, AI. I think we hear a lot of talks around that.
Yeah.
We see a lot of VR, AR applications. I think we hear talks about Industry 4.0. So I think there's a lot of different how to say like segments within our industry. You've also mentioned machine vision that you guys could be pursuing. Do you have some thoughts or maybe ideas on and again not necessarily where let's say Vention is going, but what are your like thoughts on some of the maybe interesting areas of these technologies?
Yeah. I think one aspect that I think is going to I'm expecting to see is a lot more, if I can say, standard or modern programming tools and programming languages being applied to things that were considered, mission critical or not fit for standard programming. And people say, why would you program an industrial machine with C++? This is crazy. Why would you do this? Yet all the best, all the most advanced safety rated systems are programmed in that very language. So I think, these PLC technologies were brought forward to make it simpler to program machines and not necessarily have to go always to that level of sophistication of programming. But I think we're getting to the point where languages are being matured and frameworks are getting powerful enough to provide great platforms for programming machines. So there's one thing. And also this whole AI revolution and AI trend is real, right? It's going to bring tremendous value and edge in the market, but it's also going to be closer to the tools that are massively utilized for software development and less like the tools we were using to program machines 15, 20 years back. So I think there's going to be a shift towards these type of programming platforms in the future. So that there's one thing I see on the horizon.
What do you mean exactly by that? So you're saying the tools are going to get better
For
as a result
example,
of the Gen AI?
programming machines using Python or JavaScript,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the emergence of ROS for robot control as a production ready, shop floor ready technology. Is these things are going to emerge more and more in the market.
Interesting. Dave, what are your thoughts?
Um,
Or
there we go. Okay, sorry. I muted myself attempting to start talking. But no, I think it's interesting. I see lots of people kind of have those projections, and I would imagine because we have more people who are coming out of school and or learning themselves how to program on, we'll just call it modern programming languages as opposed to
Mhm.
IEC programming
That's right.
languages, that we will it will be a natural trend and or progression even more than we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. And I feel like we've seen a number of people and a number of groups go in the direction of at least wanting to be able to program using, again, we'll just call it more modern programming languages. So I think it will be a natural progression as we move to it. I would like to call out perhaps my most quoted quote by Tim Wilborn. So Francois, Tim Wilborn does a lot of training on PLCs and trainers, and he specifically works with like technicians. Technicians, people working on the machines all day, every day. And when we had him on, I don't know, a bunch of episodes ago, he said something to the effect of, "We could write 0 lines of ladder logic today, and 30 years from now, the most used programming language on the plant floor will still be ladder logic," which I thought was interesting. And thinking about it, it would make a lot of sense. And so I think we'll see the transition of away perhaps from IEC programming languages into more modern programming languages, or some sort of parallel. But I think we'll need to go solve the problem of how do we allow people who want to use
Access.
more modern, yes, how do we allow access both ways, right?
Yep.
And without both directions, we are going to absolutely struggle, as we see today, without the lack of talent, who's able to go work, or who's able to go work on those particular solutions.
Yep.
So I think that'll be interesting. I think only time will tell. I think it's certainly an interesting time to be alive when we basically have had the conversation from there probably still exist relays out on a couple of plants, as opposed to PLCs, all the way through what will we be able to do with AI and other solutions such as that. Francois, let me go ask you a question, kind of moving away a bit from specific technical programming languages and more towards building and scaling a team. As we've discussed, when you started with Vention, you were basically an individual contributor because you were
Yep.
the entire department, and now you're the CTO. So I imagine that you have hired 1 or 2 or 5 dozen people over that course in time. And I would imagine that when you were looking to hire originally, you were looking for people to go fill the gaps that you had. And you were looking for very specific people. And now you're probably looking to go hire and or build up junior engineers so that they can continue to grow and help the organization grow. Can you take us through that process, and perhaps some of the things that you were thinking of both early on when you were looking for those really good senior people versus today, when again I imagine that you're looking for almost the opposite, but to grow them into similar senior people?
Mhm. So there's one fundamental thing, at least for me, about hiring is always hire for scale, right? Not everybody has the same ability to scale, but you should always shoot for hiring people that will scale as much as possible with the organization. So that's always something that actually Etienne taught me this, and I thought that was super helpful along the way, because you need time for these people, for people to grow and learn. So if you always hire just for the job you're looking for, it can be difficult to scale the organization organically after. So it's always, it served us very well in our ability to grow the team organically, but you have no choice but to go externally also for certain roles. So that's one key element that I've always was very interested in when I hire people. We also always hire people that have a passion for what we do and have a certain amount of grit, because building a business from nothing to where we're at today and then scaling it to IPO stage and beyond takes a lot of effort and energy. And I'm convinced that that energy comes through passion, right? When you do something you like, you just get extra juice. You just change the topic you work on and you go for a couple more hours. So we always had, these tests or case studies where we would hire people, would, challenge them and see like, okay, are you really into this, or this is just another job you want to put on your CV and leave in a year, right? So we've always tested people for passion and grit throughout the process. Another thing I like to do a lot is hire people that are atypical, unconventional, and different. And the reason why I like this is because you have too many blind spots, and it becomes very hard to build an organization when people all want to do the same thing. So I'd have people interested in very low level stuff, people interested in leadership, people interested in writing tech docs or doing these podcasts. So you can always, there's always room for people to go where they want, and there's no traffic jam. So that's another thing. So I've always been very careful about to just hire a variety of people. And the other thing is, as you grow a company, you always want to be opportunistic, right? Like, you don't necessarily need to have a role open to hire somebody that is very talented. So when we keep our eyes open, and if we do cross paths with some great talent, we say, hey, like, are you interested? I think we could use you for many things here. Like, let's see, would you be a fit? So we've done a lot of these type of opportunistic hiring, and it served us really well. So I don't know, just a couple hiring tips. I don't know if that answers your question, but a couple, ways to attack the problem.
Let me ask you, I
No,
guess, I've never heard hire for scale, and although I've taken an MBA level HR
Scale.
class, yeah, no, no,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that. I guess, like, how do you figure that out in candidates? How do you, like, assess that, right? Because it's a very
Yeah, it's
difficult, I think, thing to
yeah,
manage.
yeah, yeah. It's quite difficult, but yeah, I guess on the contrast, it would be hire somebody because they're very good at one thing today, and that's the only thing that excites you about that candidate is they will be able to help me deliver project A, and if I have them, project A is going to go well. And that's why
Mhm.
I hired that candidate. That would be the opposite of hiring for scale, right? Hiring for scale would be that candidate is bright-minded, he or she is fast, they've done a variety of things, they've been successful, they've grown their responsibility, and you know that potentially, or like it looks like that person would continue to grow and take more and scale. So for me, this is what I mean by hiring for scale, right? Like, you hire the candidate not for the value of the candidate today, but your projection of that candidate in the future.
No, I think it definitely makes sense, right? I'm not questioning the thought. I think
Yeah.
I've not thought of it that way, and maybe because
Mhm.
I've been in very large organizations where, like, again, you just want someone who can do that specific job today versus, in a startup. Obviously, it's a little bit different, but I do
Yeah,
like that
there's
perspective.
kind of in a startup of our size, there's kind of a vacuum towards the top sometimes, where
Mhm.
there's you grow and there's always more to do, and you have to make sure that as I was saying before, as you undertake more and take more responsibilities, you can also have people underneath you that grow with, and if it becomes difficult to hire people from outside and pick up these roles fast enough, so when you have people internally, it's highly helpful.
I like that, Dave.
Agreed. I think to Vlad's point, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure I've ever heard of anyone use the phrase hire for scale, hire for what they will do next. I've certainly heard of people talk about hiring for upside and having paths for those people to continue to grow, which I think is interesting. And I would say, especially in this industry, kind of to Vlad's point, is lots of times you see people hired to go do a project, and maybe they're a really good developer on one platform, and at some point they want to go make a transition. And more times than I wish to recount, I've had friends who have tried to go make transitions to other parts of businesses, um, and they say, hey, I don't want to be the boots on the ground person at the factory anymore, or I don't want to develop on this platform anymore. Can I go try to work higher into a leadership organization?
Mhm.
And it's almost like a shrug. Well, we need you to go continue to do this development. And so
Yeah,
I,
there's nothing
yeah,
worse to grow than to make yourself indispensable. Like,
yeah,
if you're indispensable, you're gonna stay
yes.
there, right? Yeah. So that's why when if I hire a principal engineer, I don't want just a principal engineer. I want a principal
Mhm,
engineer who's gonna build principal engineers, right? And
mhm.
that's a principal engineer that has scale. He's gonna coach take his time to go show others how to get there, and not just do his principal engineer work. And this is a little bit, the philosophy of hiring for scale.
So I love this, and I'm going to completely change the order of questions that we always ask towards the end, because I guess for not long time listeners, everyone knows that I ask for career advice. I guess, Francois, I want you to go if you wouldn't mind digging into that
Yeah.
principal engineer situation. I guess one, how does someone look for a principal engineer
Mm.
who is going to go build principal engineers? I guess I want you to ask that question, but I also want to ask the question for engineers: how can they be the people who perhaps project, my goal is to go build other people who are good engineers so I can
Yeah.
continue to move upwards?
Yeah. So at least at Vention, where a principal engineer is in the organization is it's a VP level, it's a business partner, right?
Yep.
So again, it's somebody that is able to understand the commercial pressures, the funding pressures, legal pressures, business risk pressures, and bring that back on the technical side and find solutions. So it's not just about tech anymore. It's about how does tech serve the business in the most meaningful way, right? So that's for sure one thing about principal engineers. It's also people that will be able to see a lot wider than the implementation, right? It's how we build systems, for the future, how we choose technology. It's like mini CTOs, really. So they see in the future, they think system, they think architecture, and they have a business mind, and they have to build others. They have to build other younger engineers into principal engineers and make them grow, right? And that's going to be via senior engineers as their proxies and all the way down to interns. So yeah. And they have one thing we also like at Vention is people that are reasonable and flexible, right? Like you can imagine this principal engineer as this very stiff authority that has one answer for one question. But even in technology, if it's a black and white field, there's always a variety of nuances and of ways to solving the problem. And because of all these pressures around technology, you have to be flexible and you have to be able to adapt. So we're also looking for a certain level of flexibility in how a principal engineer will help us.
Yeah, I would make the comment. I think the higher you get, usually the more flexible you need to be, right? As an engineer, as someone technical, you want everything to be, zeros or ones, but the reality
Yeah,
of business is very,
yeah.
I guess, like different from that.
And I feel like as I grow, I get less flexible. And I think it's
Okay.
also like the more senior you get, the more successes you have. So the more confident and the more set in your ways you get. And something that as leaders we have to stay constantly. We have to remind ourselves, to remain absolutely flexible. And also when we hire some more senior people, they need to have that trait. I think it's important.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. I love that. Vlad, we've got a couple of extra minutes before I ask the rest of the questions. I want to give you a chance to go ask one more question to Francois, if you have it.
I think, maybe asking the follow-up from what Dave was mentioning on the engineer side, maybe how do you become someone that is maybe sought after by a company that is growing, right? Because I think a lot of engineers or control systems, I want to say people almost fall into the category of, I'm going to work at this factory for, 20, 30 years and retire. And some are looking for maybe a more modern or more like startup approach to working in that field. So maybe what would you suggest for someone that is looking into I want to say a younger organization as a position or career?
Mhm. I think there's one of the aspect that is extremely, and I should have talked about this when we were talking hiring, is something that I always look for, and I think is good career advice for people that want to change companies is you need to have a builder mindset. That's what startups are looking for. At least that's what we're looking for, and I think multiple other startups are looking for people that can build things. Not people. We don't hire people so they get in the job and do one thing. We're looking for people that build, right? That will build the processes, that will build a function, that will build a market channel, that will build a product. We're not looking for just doers. We're looking for people that build. And I feel like when you have a CV, a resume, and interests that show that you are a builder, I think that resonates with a lot of startups. So we get people saying, I rebuilt a car, I converted it to an electric car. I'm like this guy, this person likes to build, likes to change stuff around them. This is highly interesting. And when your profile shows that, I think it's powerful.
I like that.
Absolutely. I like that. I like that. I like that as well. Francois, this has been amazing. We've asked you for some career advice. I know that you were giving us a bunch of predictions of the future, talking about programming languages.
Yeah.
I guess I want to open it up, go talk about kind of IIoT. Can we get what you think IIoT is going to become into the future? Will it become larger? Will it kind of die? And we'll go talk about other different things to go replace the hardware software combinations. Can we get a prediction from you as to where IIoT will be in I don't know, 5 years?
I think it's no surprise. Everybody knows there's going to be more devices,
Yeah.
and people have a hard time imagining the future. But if I was to forecast it, I think there is going to be quite a bit of value to derive out of all this information. But
Mhm.
what that value will be is extremely difficult for me to tell. And also, in industrial automation and in manufacturing and robotics, you need hardware to be there for that data to be collected. So we think about Google, we think about Facebook, we think about all these massive data platforms. Uh, the data cannot appear in industrial automation as fast as the data appears in these areas. So I think there is going to be value. I think there's going to be AI. I think there's going to be insights generated from this data via software. But I think it's going to be it's not going to be as explosive as it's been in the consumer and social media space. So it is there. It will come, but I don't think it's going to have just quite the magnitude it had in other aspects of our lives.
What are, I guess, let me ask you this because obviously you're closer to the hardware and software on this side. What are the roadblocks? Is it the hardware we currently have? Is it the sensors? Is it the communication protocols? All the above? Like, and I guess, like, what do we need to solve as the industry to make that happen or to make it easier?
I think to if the well, I don't think it's ever going to be as massive a data opportunity as it is for social media and just the consumer space of us going into the internet and entering a massive amount of data every day and very rich data and very well tagged data. So I think it's not going to get there. But I think one of the solution is definitely if we get more machines in the field and if we solve more automation robotics problem, we're going to have naturally more data. Right?
Mhm.
So I think it's just a matter of deploying more assets. Deployment at scale is going to help us have more data, and when more machines, and when you have more machines, you have more data. And when you have more data, you have more insights, etc. Right? So I think it's just the barrier to deployment is the boundary.
Absolutely. And if I may, in regards to social media, to a large extent, all of the people on social media, we are both the product and the people who are happy to go push all of that data
That's
on
right.
there, which translates to billions or trillions of dollars being
So much.
spent to go build better, more social media to translate into ads so that Vlad goes and buys more things on Amazon, and kind of all of this over and over again. And then we're like, hey, I bought this awesome, I don't know, new security system that I'm putting together over the weekend off of Amazon. Let me go post it on social media so that there's more information on the internet. And to a large extent, lots of the manufacturing is very kind of walled off, right? And they are both the consumer and the producer,
That's right.
and they have to spend the money quite literally on both sides, right? So on the side of going and allowing people to go put the data in there and then quite literally paying people to go put the data in there. So I think it's interesting, and I agree with Francois. I don't think that we'll get to a point in which we are seeing petabytes or more of data being pushed, especially from individual groups. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It would be interesting. I don't know what we would do with all of it, Vlad, but that would certainly be interesting.
It's a lot of inductive sensor data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all of our longtime listeners know that we always ask our guests for a book or content recommendation. Francois, you said you have a video for us, which might be the first video. Vlad, correct me if my memory isn't correct, but Francois got a video for us, perhaps a first for Manufacturing Hub. What do you have for us today, Francois?
Yeah, so the video, I mean, we talked about leadership and we thought about startup, and at the core of this are people and lots of people that you have to train and coach and inspire. And I was recently revisioning or looking at a video from back in the days when I was in college that I thought was great, and I still think it's great. And it's called "Why Leaders Eat Last."
Mm-hmm.
And it's a video by Simon Sinek, which I thought was both interesting in terms of leadership and also in human behavior, which is a skill you need to build a big business. So I thought that's a good one.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. I have not seen the video in a while, but it is now added to add it to the list and maybe what I will fall asleep watching later
Yep.
tonight. That is awesome. Francois, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Last
Pleasure.
question that we ask is how can our listeners help you? Who should reach out? Who are you looking to connect with? Is Vention hiring? Are you guys looking for new customers? Very much kind of your open very much kind of open your your open microphone on
Yeah.
how can our listeners help you in what you're doing.
Well, I think it's simple, right? It's by promoting the Vention platform and bringing customers to us so we can help them automate and solve their problems and grow the business and help them be more productive. So this is what we're all about. We know there's tons of people out there that need automation and that could benefit from the Vention platform. It's not always easy to get to explain what our business does to in the entire market. So by all means, if you guys know somebody needs help with their machines, would be happy to help.
Francois, thank you so much. I will say, I don't know who created the Vention branding of your very deep petrol teal color. I'm sure there's a very specific color, but every time I walk by a place, I'm like, I know exactly who built those.
That was Etienne, the CEO, has a very good eye for design. So that's it started lime green, by the way, but a couple first investors told us, guys, this sounds great, but you're gonna have to do away with the green. You're gonna have to find something else.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That seems like something I would have come up with of, well, we should build everything lime green. And then all of the people in my life would just shake their head and say, it's a great idea, but the color is absolutely terrible. Although I would love to see some pictures. If anyone still has original Vention lime green, okay, I would like to see that.
I'll find
absolutely. But no, Francois, this has been awesome. Everyone, thank you for coming and hanging out with us on a Monday. We will be back Wednesday, same time, same place, in order to continue our IIoT conversation. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Make sure that you're following Francois and Vention. Make sure you're following Manufacturing Hub and Vlad and myself. If you guys have made it this far on podcast format, again, thank you guys so much. Please feel free to rate us 5 stars and to like and to share and do all of those other things that when I remember to ask, you guys do, and then more people find us, which is just awesome. But until Wednesday, we'll see everyone soon.